Welcome to another episode of the Healthy and High Performing Podcast, where we help entrepreneurs and executives unlock increasing access to their best selves, level up leadership, and scale profitability and productivity while restoring energy and vitality to their work and life. In just 15 or 20 minutes and 5 powerful questions will get you there. My guest today is Mamie Kanfer Stewart. Mamie is passionate about helping people thrive at work. She's the host of the Modern Manager podcast and author of Momentum, creating effective, engaging, and enjoyable meetings. Mamie is also the founder of Meteor, a training firm focused on productive meetings. And in addition, she's an executive coach and trainer who works with entrepreneurs, managers, and teams to build the mindset, skills, and habits they need to successfully manage themselves and their teams so everyone can be their best selves and do their best work. Mamie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Me too. So I think we had a couple of things we were going to talk about today regarding being an effective manager, and under that, perhaps having good meetings. But let's just start with how to be an effective manager. Mamie, what is maybe the number one challenge or a few of the biggest challenge that your ideal clients face in being effective managers?
Well, I think what it really starts with is the fact that we don't train people. We don't have a focus on what it means to actually be a manager. There are so many resources and so many programs if you want to learn to be a leader. But if you are talking about the day-to-day work of being a manager, we're basically promoted into a job of managing other humans and not set up for success. We're not given the resources, the support, or the understanding of what it means to be responsible for another group of humans. And that shows up across the board. So it's not that my clients all struggle with communication or decision-making or running meetings or giving feedback. It's that we struggle with all of those things because that's the job of a manager, and no one has helped us figure out how to do it. So we basically either wing it, do what we've seen other people role model, or do the opposite of what other people have done to us that we really didn't like. And some of that is fine and we'll figure it out. But a lot of times we just don't have the knowledge to be able to effectively play the role of a manager across the board.
Yeah, that seems super accurate in my experience. So people they compensate by trying to wing it or by doing the opposite of what they experienced and didn't like. And what is that? Can you give us some examples of that and what the results are?
Sure. So I'll speak from my own experience first, which is I don't like when people are on top of me. I want space to do my work the way that I like to do it. And so when I first started hiring folks, that's how I treated them. I said, here's the assignment. Here's what I want you to do. Go do it. And then come to me if you have questions. And for some people, that is great. There's nothing wrong with that. Part of the job of a manager is to understand that lots of people have different styles and different comfort levels, different capabilities. And so for some of my team members, that was great. And for others, it was the worst possible thing I could have done because they walked away feeling totally untethered. They didn't know if what they were doing was the right thing. They were scared to come ask me questions because they didn't want to look incapable. So then they'd bring something back to me and I'd be like, oh my gosh, here's all the problems with it. And then they feel demoralized that they didn't do it right. And I would get frustrated that they didn't just come and ask me questions. They just made a bunch of assumptions and spent hours researching when I just could have told them, here's what I need you to look at, or here's the best resource for that, or let me show you how to do this. And that kind of situation happens all the time where we think the way that we want to be managed is the way that everybody wants to be managed. And that's just not the case.
I love that example. And that's, it's funny. I hear a lot of examples of what's often called micromanaging, right? And that's, where someone above you is just, you feel, I think you use the word on top of you, like they're just always checking in. They're always maybe providing suggestions or feedback or trying to control the process or how the work is done. And I think a lot of people find that frustrating, but I loved your example, and I think it opened it up because, the primary mistake I heard is just projecting our own preferences for work style onto our team, right? Onto the people that we're managing. Yeah, I love that. So, all right. Any other examples that you want to point out?
Sure. I mean, this one is a little different, but if we're going to go into the space of meetings, I feel like it's one of the biggest insights that I want managers to take away, which is when I talk to people, and I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of people about their meetings, and I'll say, tell me about your meetings this week. And every single person will tell me about a terrible meeting that they sat in that was a waste of time, could have been an email, conversation spun around. They didn't get to a decision. They walked out being like, that was 2 hours of my life gone. I mean, yet to meet a single person who will raise their hand and say, my meetings are the ones that everyone hates. My meetings are the worst. And this is another one of those mistakes that we make as managers because we weren't taught how to run meetings. There are processes and activities and steps to follow to have a productive meeting. But we think in our head, I know what this meeting is about. I know what we're trying to accomplish in general. I have a plan, and therefore this is going to work. But everyone else around the room, unless you're a really good meeting leader naturally, is sitting there going, oh my gosh, I have to sit through this again. And why are they still on slide one? And we've been here for 15 minutes already. And so it's another kind of mistake that we make where we think that because it works for us, it's going to work for everyone else. And especially when it comes to meeting, that is just not true.
So what I heard, correct me what I missed. What I heard was something like, again, it's that mistake of projecting our way of doing things, our preferences for doing things onto the team and running meetings in that way.
Exactly. And assuming that because it's working for us, because we know in our head what we want, therefore everyone is going to get that by osmosis. If we don't tell people, this is what this meeting is intended to accomplish, and I call it the desired outcome. This is what we are going to achieve in this meeting, not what we're going to talk about, not the activities that we're going to do, but what we are going to accomplish, so that by the end of this meeting, our work has actually moved forward. If you're not clear on that, and I'll tell you, a lot of times we're not even that clear. We know we want to look at a budget together, but I'm not totally sure is the whole point of this meeting just to discuss the variances, or are we trying to come to a decision about a reforecast? And it happens for any kind of meeting. If you don't know exactly what the outcome is, it's hard for you to facilitate to that outcome. It's hard for you to know who the right people to be in that meeting are. And it's hard for people to participate to make sure that they're contributing in a way that aligns towards that outcome, which is why meetings go off on tangents, why we end up feeling like our wheels are spinning, and we walk out of the room going, what was the purpose of that? And what did we accomplish? And where did we land? And what am I supposed to do next? So it comes back to, one, not everybody is going to know what we know in our brain. And not everybody is going to work the same way that we work. So we have to be extra explicit about what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And we have to be really cognizant of what other people need to set them up for success to do their work.
I love that. So it's well put. I wonder if we can unpack that a little more. So like, do you have, I don't know, I guess we've almost outlined a similar problem in two areas. So is there a simple like process or way, that method you have that can kind of be applied to both the managing and the meetings that addresses these? I know you sort of touched on that, but is there a bigger process or a model?
I don't have any magic 4-step process for kind of how to show up as a manager all the time. But the things that I work with my clients on and that I talk about on my podcast are things like recognizing your own style, understanding your preferences, and then talking to your team members about what their style is, what their preferences are, and learning how to work with each person individually. And then learning how to work with this group of people as a collective, because the dynamics are different. I can work individually with each of my team members, which means I can run our one-on-ones slightly differently depending on what each person needs. I can motivate them each differently in the way that I talk to them. I can celebrate them each differently. One person might want public praise and I can give them a shout out in a meeting. Another person might be horrified by the idea that I'm going to make everybody clap for them in a meeting. What they really want is for me to write them a handwritten note that thanks them for their work and acknowledges their contributions. So we can work one-on-one with each person if we just have these conversations with them and we notice where we have differences and we can figure out a way to align on those differences so that it's not me having to totally change for them and it's not them having to totally change for me, which is how it kind of used to be. Like the very old school way of thinking was, I'm the manager, everyone should adapt to me. And so we need to find that middle ground where we can work individually with each person. And then we look at how the team comes together. What are the dynamics between the people on my team? And how can I, as a manager, facilitate us to work together collectively in a way that creates synergy and not friction?
Yeah, I love that. And your approach, to me, it strikes me as very refreshing and straightforward. And also like, wow, that's okay. Clearly, if someone's going to manage or run meetings that way, they care and they're trying to communicate and they're trying to get to know their team and their team's preferences and support them. It also sounds like a lot of like manager work in a way, and so it's almost like I wonder if some people default to the other ways in addition to not being trained or react some sort of reaction. It's almost like maybe out of sometimes laziness, right? Like just not wanting to put in the work, possibly.
Yeah, and I would say even less than laziness, I think, is the fact that we're all on the edge of burnout like
Yeah.
every other day, right? We are so overloaded. And this goes back to the fact that being a manager is a
Mhm.
title and a set of responsibilities, but it isn't given the space or the honor I think it deserves as a role. And there's plenty of memes going around that say a manager's job is to sit in meetings. And well, I love that because I love meetings. It's actually a problem that we don't see the job of a manager as to be spending significant part of your day working with your team and supporting your team members to do their work. You are a conduit between whoever is sitting above you and the customer or the clients or whoever's kind of downstream from you. And your team members, the reason we have managers is because you get to be the one who helps get the most out of those people as individuals and as a collective. So you get to kind of, exemplify what they're capable of. But if we're so busy doing our own work, putting our heads down, we're so busy running around between all these different things that we have on our to-do list and managing our email and everything else and going to meetings, it's hard for us to invest the time and the energy to really play that role of people manager well.
Yeah, great points. I it reminds me, I did a summit on skills for middle management and supporting middle management last fall, and a lot of the topics and insights that came out of that were really just support for that sort of crucial middle layer in the organization between leadership and working teams, and how it's often unrecognized and under-resourced and stretched and sort of this uncomfortable middle role. I love the metaphor of a conduit. So if our listeners want to say, okay, I like Mamie, I like your approach. How do I begin to implement that today? Where would you suggest they begin?
One of my favorite activities to do with teams is what I call a personal operating manual. And it's a
Mm,
series of questions that you have each person reflect on their own, write down all the answers, and then you share. And you can do it either one-on-one, me as the manager with each of my team members individually, or you can facilitate it as a group. But the questions help lift up some of these places where we often have differences amongst us that can become points of friction or communication breakdown. Everything ranging from personality types. So if your team does use or could use or has access to tools like the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or DISC, you can use those as one place for conversation. But you can also ask questions like, in what kind of environment do you focus best? Some people like to sit in that coffee shop with all the buzzing. Other people are like, put me in a library where it's silent. You can ask questions about how people want to receive feedback, about how they like to be recognized and receive appreciation. You can ask questions about communication style and decision making and how they like to be involved. Do they need information ahead of time so they have time to process? Do they want to be, presented to? Are they more of a kind of person that wants to be in dialogue around things? So you can ask questions that address a lot of these different parts of how we manage folks. And it gives you a chance to share as the manager and say, this is my natural tendency. My natural tendency is to just be a straight shooter. When I have feedback for you, I'm going to tell you, this is what I'm observing. This is the situation. How can we address it? But you can also hear from your team member where they say, feedback really makes me anxious. I really like to see it in writing, or I like to hear it and have time to process before I respond. Or don't be surprised if I cry because I get very emotional. Don't take that as a sign of anything other than I just need time to process. Once you've written these things down and had a chance to share, then you can talk about, what do we do with this? How do we now take this knowledge and change how we show up with each other so that I can give you feedback in a way that's going to make it easiest for you to process, and you can react to feedback in a way that you feel most comfortable that we're going to get to a good outcome.
I love that. So in your experience, do managers put their own personal operating manual? Do they put their own version together and then give that to their team members, or do you have one of these already like completed, that they could maybe customize and use?
So I have one that I use with teams, and everyone fills it out. And then depending on what the manager or the team wants, either manager will meet one-on-one and they'll work with each person, and we'll kind of go through and we'll say, okay, how do you use another example than something I've already shared. How do you like to receive information? And the person will say, I really like things I can listen to. I'm a good audio person. I listen to stuff all the time. That's the easiest way for me to receive information. And the manager will then say, okay, well, my best way of receiving information is in writing. I would much rather read a 12-page document than listen to a 25-minute audio message. So that just becomes information. And now the two of them can say, okay, so what does this mean for how we work together? So sometimes it goes one-on-one like that, and you kind of work through the document. And other times we do it as a team, where we'll take different scores depending on the format that they're using. And we'll say, how many people on this team are introverts and how many people on this team are extroverts? And then what does this mean? Oh, wow, there's one person on this team that's introverted and all 7 other team members are extroverts. Oh, this makes a lot more sense for why this one person is so quiet in our meetings. Okay, so what can we do about this now? Oh, we can send information. We can send pre-work more than 4 minutes before the meeting. Or let's stop presenting during meetings. Let's actually give that information ahead of time so that this person has time to process it and come with some thoughts prepared. Or let's add some activities into our meeting. Let's use some silent time for people to write, and then we'll do a round robin sharing. And those simple kinds of changes will enable this one person who was basically sitting in the room feeling like, I'd like to participate, but this is not designed for me in a way that I feel comfortable and confident participating. And now we can make some changes as a team that will allow this person to engage better.
I love that. It's great advice. Is there anything else that we should have talked about, or you'd like to add to this, such as a principle or another insight related to managing?
I just want to say thank you to anyone who manages people, who is listening to the show and is trying their best to be a good manager. I'm sure you do not hear it enough, but even the simple act of doing the self-learning, building the self-awareness, and trying to show up for your people and trying to grow, I think is really a special thing, because so many of us are so busy just trying to survive, doing what we think is right without taking the time to actually pause and say, is there a way I could do this better? So the biggest thing I want people to take away is, don't just listen to how to be a good manager. Go off and try something. create a personal operating manual, plan an agenda for your meeting, and simply just decide what is the outcome we're going to get to. Or have a conversation with a team member and ask them, how do you want to receive feedback? How do you want to receive praise? Just do something that will take you one step closer towards the best version of yourself as a manager.
I love that. That's the practical approach that we embrace here on the podcast. Yeah, just taking those small, simple steps that often take a little bit of reflection or courage, but ultimately move everything forward. Mamie, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.